Now I want green groups today to add one more endangered species to their list. One more endangered species for them to fight for our green politicians and judges to protect. Here they are. Look while there's still some left. Blue-collar workers in the country, a new endangered species. In fact, these guys have just lost their jobs thanks to yet more green bans. Their paper mill in Maryvale, Victoria, is the latest to be shut down. 200 more jobs lost. That's the end of reflex paper as well. And for the first time in our lives, we won't be making writing paper in Australia. We have to import it all, no doubt some of it from China, whose exports to us of paper and paperboard have been soaring. How China must love what the Greens are doing to us. Now, this paper mill is closing because it says it just can't get enough wood supplies anymore. Not after a Victorian court last year stopped access to some forests because green groups claimed loggers weren't doing enough to find and protect the supposedly endangered species, the greater glider. And that may, in some small way, help to explain why our unemployment rate today jumped by much more than predicted, from 3.5% to 3.7%. But don't worry, said the Treasurer, it's all going to plan. Nothing to do with the Albanese government.
We have been expecting an uptick in the unemployment rate as the economy slows a bit, as the obvious consequence of a slowing global economy mixed with the impact of interest rate rises here in our own economy. So this is the expected outcome.
Yes, nothing to do with the government suddenly flooding the market with 200,000 more immigrants competing for jobs. Total coincidence. And nothing to do with the war that Labor and the Greens are waging against business in this country, especially businesses they blame for supposedly damaging the planet with their gases. Now that Maryvale mill, that's nothing compared to what's coming thanks to these global warming extremists. Now today, the Greens leader, Adam Bandt, probably the worst leader in Greens history, and that is saying something, insisted the Albanese government had to agree to his price for supporting their new scheme to cut emissions from our biggest 215 companies. Now, the paper industry has been destroyed. Now the government had to ban every new gas and coal project as well. And warning, fake scare coming up.
Well, I don't think the government's position is ultimately tenable. I mean, we've got our Pacific Island neighbours saying, please stop opening up coal and gas mines because it threatens our very existence. And yet, on the other hand, saying they want to keep opening new coal and gas mines and making the problem worse.
Now, hold on there. First of all, we run our economy in the interests of Australians, not Pacific Island leaders who are trying to guilt us into paying them millions in supposed compensation. But secondly, Bandt is once again peddling a completely fake scare. How often does that have to be pointed out? Even the ABC, after years of spreading lines like that about global warming drowning Pacific Islands, had to finally admit that, oops, the science actually shows nearly half the islands haven't lost any land at all to rising seas, and most of the rest were actually growing, not drowning. Bandt refuses to admit that truth. He'll say just about anything to destroy the gas and oil industry he falsely believes are destroying the planet. It is such a fantasy. I mean, just for heaven's sake, just go look outside. Our dams have been holding record amounts of drinking water, and that's great. We're getting fewer cyclones over the past few decades. That's great. And we just posted another record wheat crop. More food? That's fantastic. So where is this climate catastrophe the Greens keep claiming? But here's our real threat today. The Albanese government, hearing this demand from the Greens to ban all new gas and coal projects when we're already short of gas and coal for our power stations, for our industry, for our homes, isn't saying to these crazy kids, hey, listen, you're mad, sunshine. No way.
The Greens have offered to pass your government's climate legislation in full with one amendment: no new coal and gas mines. Are you seriously willing to dump your whole climate plan because Labor wants to open new coal and gas mines?
I am so very delighted to have a question from the Greens about practical action on climate change and the environment.
So, here are the Greens demanding the end of industries that employ tens of thousands of people, hundreds, and earn us billions, and give us reliable electricity. Yet here is the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, saying, well, look, you know, it's going to be the Liberals' fault, the opposition's fault, if we in Labor now have to make a deal with these mad Greens and offer them some kind of compromise in order for Labor then them to agree to Labor hitting big business with a much higher carbon tax.
What the coalition's pig-headed approach has done is that it has dealt the Greens into the game. When the coalition takes the absurd decision to oppose, for example, the safeguard mechanism that they designed and supported 9 months ago, then that makes the Greens more relevant than they would otherwise be.
Actually, Treasurer, it is pathetic for you to demand the coalition back your ridiculous policies to slash emissions, policies that will just put more people out of work, policies that are just going to raise prices, just because you'll say, well, otherwise, you know, we're going to make an even worse deal with some lunatics. It's incredible. What sort of blackmail is that? Don't make us do this. I mean, seriously. How about this, Treasurer? You just back off. You just drop the whole thing. But if you do make a deal with the Greens, it's on you. For these guys. I mean, here today is the Energy Minister, Chris Bowen, the government's most extreme global warming believer, dangerous man, acting tough, but not saying no to these Greens at all, and saying something a little bit weird about some mandate.
I won't be agreeing to things which are not in keeping with our election mandate. But just like with the climate bill, just like our electric vehicle tax cut, just like everything else we've done, people of good faith have suggestions which are complementary to the government's agenda, in keeping with our mandate, then I'm all ears. But things which are not in keeping with our mandate, I will not be accepting. I've made that very clear to the Greens, but I look forward to further discussions.
Reality check to Bowen. What mandate? 2/3 of Australian voters did not choose you, Labor, or Labor policies at the last election. 67% of Australian voters chose any other party but Labor. You just sneaked in on preferences, including from many One Nation voters, for instance, including from Clive Palmer supporters. You do not have a mandate, as most people would understand. You certainly didn't have a mandate to do a lot of what you've already since done. I mean, socialist-style price caps on coal and gas prices. I mean, I didn't remember you promising that. Forcing gas projects to break contracts if the government wants their gas instead. Ripping the Queen's face with the $5 note. That came as a surprise. Letting unions organise industry-wide strikes. Where did that idea come from? You certainly have no mandate to now ban all new coal and gas projects or even talk about it. So why don't you say so out loud? Why can't you tell the Greens absolutely no deal here? Instead, you're negotiating. Look, I shouldn't care so much. I shouldn't care so much. You know, I'm 63. I own my own home, don't have a mortgage, don't need to worry about keeping my job. I could happily retire tomorrow. Spend more time with my lovely wife, and my old dogs, not a problem. Let Australia go down the toilet. But I feel sorry for Australians in their 20s and 30s and 40s, and not just for my children, I've got to say. I mean, people struggling to buy a home now, to pay it off, to give their young family a good start. I mean, what hope have they got, really, when this country seems in the grip of some crazy suicide cult, a green religion that's making workers like these an endangered species, without politicians saying boo against the green madness that is now coming for coal and gas workers as well? What are we doing to them?